guys, how's it going? Today we're going to be planting some potatoes and some beautiful blooming ground covers. There's our three varieties of potatoes. We've got Huckleberry Gold, Red Pontiac, and German Butterball. And then this is the area that we prepared yesterday to plant in, and it is beautiful. Look at this soil. Got it all worked up, got our amendments in. So we really have very little work to do in this area to get the potatoes in the ground. Now, when I started off yesterday, we started working up this bed right here. And as I was in the process of doing that, I, thought we've had foxglove in that space the past 2 years, and I can't find any evidence to suggest that they emit or leach any of their toxic properties, because foxglove are a very toxic plant. Like the whole plant, every part of the plant is very poisonous. I can't find that they leave any of that in the soil behind to where, the future crops that you put in that space can take it up into the plant, but I don't want to risk it. So we ended up prepping this area right here, which we previously had wheat in and haven't had anything toxic or poisonous in this area. So I started off with Biotone starter fertilizer, sprinkled that down the whole row, and then we went in with land and sea compost. So those are the two amendments I always use whenever we swap a crop out or if we're planting something new. And then I brought a tiller in, which we don't rototill very often, but this area had become quite compacted. There were a lot of roots and things like that in it. So I was going to either have to go at it by hand with a garden fork, which would have taken me a while, or I could use a tiller. So I just find myself in need of a tiller every once in a while, and usually I borrow the one my parents have, but we decided to go get our own, so now we have one here, which is going to be so nice to have from time to time whenever we find the need to use it. But potatoes, being a root crop, they like to have a nice fluffy soil to grow in. It makes for better shaped potatoes. You usually get more in a bed that's been prepared like this. So again, if we look in here, it's fluffy down like, 8-10 inches. And we really only need to put our potato pieces about 6 or so inches deep. Okay, a little bit of information about our potato varieties, and you can see I've already prepared them so that the cut ends had a chance to heal over and dry. We have the Huckleberry Gold, which is a 90 to 100 day potato. They have purple skin, which, let me do one of these. Yeah, you can see that purple color, hopefully. I'm trying not to shade them. So purple skin, yellow interior, they're creamy, they're wonderful. This is the first type of potato I use up out of the root cellar, and they do store really well. We have a Red Pontiac, which has red skin. You find these in the grocery store consistently, and they have a white interior, and they're also a really good storing potato, 90 to 100 day. And then we have the German Butterball, which are probably, they can't tell right now, but they're the most yellow on the interior. Let's see if I can rough up a spot. They are so good. This is a russet type potato, so they get kind of like a net looking skin. They stay a little bit smaller than the russet Burbanks, which are like your classic Idaho potato. So to plant your potatoes or to prepare them for planting, you can cut them or not. It kind of depends on the size of your potatoes. Sometimes if your potatoes are really small, you can just leave them whole. You just want to make sure that they have some really good eyes. That's what you see right here, those growth points. That's where your potato is going to grow up from the potato, so you want to plant them with those eyes facing upward, but you can cut them, especially if you have a lot of nice eyes showing or if your potatoes are super big. You just want to make sure that each cut piece has 1 to 2 sets of really strong eyes. Like this one here, you can see an eye right here and an eye right there. So in our hole, which we're going to go about 6 inches deep, we're going to make sure that that cut side is facing sort of down while those eyes are facing up. And typically, especially if you're going to be cutting your seed potatoes like I have, 1 pound of seed potatoes will go about 10 to 12 feet down a row. And I don't really have all that many. It's not going to take up much space. So I'm planning on planting peppers, a block of corn, and probably some sunflowers in this same row. So here's how I'm going to do it. Let me start with some of the shorter day potatoes first, because I want to harvest them out of the front side first. So I'm going to line mine up. I want them kind of by an emitter here. We go about 8 to 12 inches apart from one another. Typically, put my ID tag here. These are like the T labels. I can't remember exactly what they're called, like Rapiclip 13-inch T labels. They work nicely because they're big and they show up. Okay. There, so you can see I've got 5 potato pieces strung across this first part of the row, and I'm going to plant them in a ways because potato plants get huge and I don't want them leaning over the grass. So you can go in and dig yourself a hole, or if you want to, you can dig a trench and just place your potatoes down in a trench, which I've done some years, but since the soil is so fluffy, I'll be able to do my planting by just pushing the potatoes down into the soil. But just for demonstration purposes, you've got your hole right here. I can see the eyes of the potato here, cut side there, and I cut mine day before yesterday, so they're nice and dry. You don't want to put wet cut ends down in the ground. That can make them rot because they don't have a chance to dry out. But the eyes are going to be facing up. So you can see I'm going to go down a little deeper. We're about 6 inches or so at the bottom of the hole. The eyes are facing up, and then we're just going to cover them all the way over. Same thing with this one. This piece doesn't have very strong eyes, but I can tell that there's some starting right here and right here. Cut sides there, just like that. Now some gardeners like to hill their potatoes, so they make their trench, they set their potato pieces at the bottom of it, and then they just barely cover over the top of the potatoes in the beginning. So you still have a little bit of a visible trench. As the potato starts to grow, they'll hill up soil over the potato, and they'll keep hilling soil as that potato grows until it's at soil level, and sometimes even up further. They say that that can form up more potatoes that way. I haven't really found that to be a case as far as my experience goes. I just bury mine about 6 inches deep, cover them over, and then I don't have to worry about hilling them up, and they do just absolutely fine. I will say that once we know how the water's working here coming out of the drip tape, we'll probably come in with some compost and cover over the top of all of the drip tape just to cover it so you can't see it, and also it helps keep it in place. So that might add a little bit more height or a little bit more soil on top of the potato pieces. But with this nice fluffy soil, I'm gonna be able to lay my potato pieces out and just push them into the soil like this. It's so nice, like that. Perfect, so I'm gonna go 5 across, and then we're gonna go 8 to 12 inches apart, and I'm just gonna continue on with these until we're done. And we're done. That did not take very long at all. The prep work is usually what takes the most amount of time. So we went about halfway down the row. We've got the huckleberry golds right here, red Pontiacs, and then the German butterballs. And I ended up going 6 potatoes across instead of 5 because there was enough space. And I forgot to count how many pieces of potato we actually put in the ground, but I'm guessing right around 144. Each potato plant will average a yield between 3 and 5 pounds typically. I mean, you might end up with a little bit more or a little bit less, but that's the average. So we could end up with anywhere between 432 and 720 pounds of potatoes in this like 6 by maybe 30-ish feet is how far we went. Let me step it off. Each one of my steps is about 3 feet. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, no, about 21 feet. So 6 feet by 21 feet, that's a lot of potatoes. I usually plant so many more than this. I usually end up with a few thousand pounds of potatoes, but we just don't need to grow that many. And I'm trying to condense it all into this space. And I think I'm only gonna have room now enough for possibly peppers and corn, and that's about it. We'll do sunflowers maybe out in the dirt lands with our vine crops. So now I'm gonna water this in. I need to water my onions anyway, and then we can move on to our ground covers. Found a nice shady spot. We have all of our ground covers gathered up, and it's kind of an eclectic bunch, but really pretty. Especially these ajuga varieties because they're in full bloom. They look so gorgeous, and I intend on planting them sort of in this area here on the west side and across the lane. And they've just started to use, it sounds like, hammers building the house over there. I don't know if you can hear that, but if you do hear that, that's what's going on. Look at this one with all that pink variegation in just the leaves alone. So even when it's done blooming, which it looks gorgeous when it's in bloom with these purple bloom spikes, it still is a very colorful looking plant. And it grows about 6 to 8 inches tall, and I think that might include the height of the bloom spike. So it doesn't stay that tall all season, and then it spreads out just under a foot. But I think eventually it'll keep kind of rooting itself around, but it's not aggressive. But it can fill in an area. And they are hardy to a zone 5, and I think they're deer resistant. Yeah, deer resistant, attracts pollinators, fire resistant. Oh. It can also tolerate moist soil, and the interesting thing between the Princess Nadia and this other variety, which is Pink Lightning, this Pink Lightning, which, oh my gosh, the bloom spikes. This one can go either sun to shade. This one needs a little bit more protection. So this one is a part shade to shade loving ajuga. So I'm guessing I'm going to end up putting most of it over on this side because it does stay a little bit more shaded. This area is becoming more shaded though, as our red point maples grow, put on more size, and the North Pole arborvitaes. You know, when the sun goes down, it goes down on this side, and they do shade these flower beds later on in the evening, which is the really hot part of the day. And this Pink Lightning is also much hardier. It can take temperatures down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a zone 3. So, you know, all the way around, it's a tougher plant. The difference here, other than those things, is that the variegation is more of a creamy white and that kind of sagey green, while this one has a lot more pink. And then, of course, this one has a pink bloom, while this one has a purple bloom. Another interesting one I picked up, and they only had 4 left, so I snagged them all, but this one's called a Brass Buttons Yarrow. So a ground cover yarrow, also deer resistant, zone 4, drought tolerant, grows about 3 inches tall, a foot wide, and it attracts beneficial insects, but it also has these super interesting looking spherical, kind of chartreuse green and creamy white blooms. And then of course the feathery foliage. And this one can also go full sun or full shade, either way. And then we've got 2 selections that Samantha made. And I honestly didn't even realize they were in the cart until we got to the car. And I was in the process of loading everything up. So I thought, what the heck. There are a couple different kinds of rock cress. One of them doesn't even have a tag. So this one is purple blooming. So this is a spring blooming ground cover. And then this one is the snowcap rock cress. So it's got the white blooms. I've got stats on this one. I'm not sure. I'm guessing they're kind of similar. About 6 inches tall, about a foot wide or maybe a little bit longer. Evergreen foliage. It's got kind of like a soft leaf with a silvery blue note to the new growth. We've also got a couple of lemon thyme plants, which is not technically a ground cover, but these have been in the greenhouse for most of the winter and they're looking a little stressed. So I want to get them planted. And then we also have 5 woolly thyme plants that I've also had in the greenhouse for quite a long time. They look pretty good, especially this one. And this one goes 1 to 3 inches tall, 18-inch spread. And I wanted to show you a picture of the flowers, the really sweet light pink flowers. And it just has kind of this silvery cast because of all the woolly hairs that the leaves have. So this is the lineup. And to get this done, I'm going to be using a mixture of a hand trowel in areas that have already been mulched, like this side has already all been mulched and I don't want to make a big mess. And then I have the 3-inch Laura Edition auger for anything that goes in non-mulched areas. Mulching is a big job. We're still working on it. Most of the areas around the house are done. South garden has not been touched yet. Looks pretty good though for not having any mulch yet. There's just areas here and there where you can see some drip tubing and that sort of thing. But anyway, let's get to planting. done planting up here by the house. I got all the ajuga in and the brass button jarrow. So I thought we would stop and take a look at where all of those went before we head out to the south garden to plant the rest. So starting right here in the flower beds up closer to the house, I went in with some of the Princess Nadia ajuga in this space and in another spot down the way. I did plant some of these last year in this spot, and I know it looks sunny right now, but it's just morning sun and only until the locust fully leaves out. And once this does, it'll get a tiny bit in the early morning, and then it will be in filtered sun and shade the rest of the day. And you can see how well this did last year. It's just really sweet, and I wanted to create a little bit more of a carpet kind of around these hostas. These are the Hudson Bay hostas, which are gorgeous. I've got some white bleeding hearts that come up in the spring. There are 5 of them in here. They bloom and then they kind of fizzle up and go away. It looks like one of the Princess Nadias kind of reverted back to a green sort of ajuga, but it's very pretty. I'm leaving it. You can see this one did the same thing. This one's got the Princess Nadia here and then a green variety popping out through it. And honestly, as long as most of it stays Princess Nadia and blooms and covers the soil so that we don't have weeds and things like that, but I don't really care. I think it's all really pretty. Douglas. I also took that little Japanese maple, which I think the variety is Metamorphosis or Metamorphosa, something like that. It had sunk way down in the pot, like this far down in the pot. So I popped it out and just layered some land and sea compost, because that's what I had in the back of the gator at the bottom, which I think the Japanese maple will like because it's more of an acid-based compost, and that's what Japanese maples like. But I'm really thankful that it came back as strong as it did, because I forgot about it and did not take it inside for the winter time. It just sat right here. So I think I ended up with 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 in this space right here, and then 5 more down the way. But while we're here, I did put the brass buttons yarrow right in this corner. I think they're so sweet, and they're mixed in with some of the black pearl heuchera, which I planted here like, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. It's been a while, and this has been the best heuchera for returning for me. I mean, I think every single one has come back, and they're gorgeous. I planted some Acarus ogon, which is this grass right in here in between, and by about midsummer or so, it's a very thick, very lush looking carpet in this area. So I think having a little spot of bright emerald green right up front with those sweet little blooms, I think I'm gonna love that there. Okay, let's walk down and see the other ajuga. Oh, look at these hostas, oh my gosh. So they just went in right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just in this little section, we've got the pink-a-blue lungwort looking amazing. We've got a whole bunch of daffodils up here, and then we've got columbine right here, along with some seducer hostas. And then, what is this called? It's a ground cover that blooms like this. And it was one that was an experiment. Is it epimedium? I don't know why that name sounds like that's what this is. I can't really remember. I know I planted 2 of them here last year. 2 of them came back, which is so awesome. And they're supposed to be like a woodland kind of ground cover sort of plant. Also got the random heuchera in here. I think this is one of the cherry truffles, along with that one that I planted a bunch in here, and you can see that only like 1.5 came back. Through the years after I planted, I think I planted like 15 of them in here, they just kind of systematically died in this location throughout the course of the winter. And that's what I experienced with a lot of heucheras. That's why I'm so thrilled with how the black pearl's doing. So anyway, I think the ajuga will be pretty here. Just kind of a little pocket of pink. Okay, now we need to go to the other side. So starting right here, this is closest to the raised bed vegetable garden. There's this little flower bed that hasn't been mulched yet, so it's perfect. I got to use the auger. We've got 3 Ambridge Rose, David Austin roses in here, along with a Limelight Hydrangea Standard. There's a microchip white buddleia and some Daisy May daisies. Also some little windflower anemones in here that they come up and bloom and then fizzle out and go away for the rest of the season. I forget they're here every year, and then they pop back up in the spring. But I thought it would be pretty to gradually work on filling this space up with ground covers underneath all this stuff. So we added the pink lightning ajuga, just a few of them in here, as well as down the walkway just a bit, because there were areas I wanted to make sure to fill up. Well, there are a couple other little ground covers in here. There's the Cat's Pajamas Nepeta here, which is a fairly low growing Nepeta. And there's some chamomile and some hardy geranium, but I think the pink lightning looks really pretty in here. Huh. Okay, let's walk down this way. All the way down here, we've got our first little grouping. And I just want it toward the edge of the flower beds because I'm filling in with bigger stuff back behind it. So that's our first grouping of 6. There's some thrift blooming right now that looks really pretty. It's really filling in, especially later as we get later in the season and the sedum gets bigger back in here, the verbascum fills in. There are 3 right in here, kind of tucked in with some daisy May daisies. There's some veronica, the white wands in here. And I just wanted a little pocket of something that was a lower in height. There's some lamb's ear, and then I put one little ajuga in here. You know, we planted some other things, was it the star creeper we put right here? Anyway, I split them all in half, and most of them thrived except for the one that was right in this spot. So it worked out perfect. Okay, so that's our first little group of ground covers. Now we're gonna go finish up the rest. Smells so good. Okay, there's the lemon thyme next to the, I think this one's a moonstone blue spruce. It's got a little bit of needle cast going on, but the rest of it looks pretty good. But I really like the contrast of the icy blue needles and kind of the yellowy variegation that this lemon thyme has. And it's right next door to some perennial blue blooming hardy geraniums. And those get really quite fluffy and beautiful. I think it'll just be a really pretty mix. And then right here we have our pink rock cress, and then we've got woolly thyme in a little trio. Woolly thyme right here. Again, we've got some hardy geraniums that bloom blue. So I would love just to have the woolly thyme kind of peeking out from underneath that canopy. And then we've got autumn joy sedum right there and a caryopteris. And then we've got irises. We've got some pink blooming veronica. And then I popped in the one white rock cress. I love having more ground covers around, and I intend on continuing focusing on the ground covers and winter interests. Both of those are so important because even when you have your summer annuals and summer perennials going for it, and they really do steal the show for several months, but you would really miss, I would really miss those things that bring that structural element and also just that finishing touch. And I feel like a lot of ground covers bring that finishing touch. And I need them so badly out here because they help with weed control. They help keep the soil cooler, which in doing so keeps moisture levels higher. So things don't need to be watered quite as much when you have a really good stand of ground covers going. There's so many different varieties and different leaf structures and different bloom times that you can really add a lot to your landscape by having ground covers all over the place, and that is what my goal is. So 1 4-inch container at a time, we will get them added to the garden. I actually have a bunch of creeping veronica. After we planted that first batch over here, this spring, we had planted some last spring. I have 5 flats sitting in front of the greenhouse. My mom knows how much I love that perennial, and she saw them available again on an order sheet, so she called me and said, hey, I can get more of those if you want them. So I asked her to order them for me. They're starting to bloom and looking great, so we'll get those planted a different day. I've got watering chores I gotta go do today, especially with the breeze, so that is what we are going to go do. But I'm so happy that potatoes are in the ground. Probably the latest I've ever planted potatoes before. And then getting those few things, especially those like little languishing perennials that I've had in the greenhouse that I knew needed to get out. That feels good to get them planted. They'll be much happier. So thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was helpful, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.